many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Olly Barratt, and in this news bulletin we'll bring you updates on stories developing around the world. We begin with the latest on the nuclear diplomacy between the United States and North Korea. North Korea has outright dismissed Joe Biden's offer of talks on the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. North Korean leader and Kim Jong Un's sister Kim Yo has ridiculed Biden's offer. More on that story shortly, but first let's take a look at all the headlines. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam lashes out at critics questioning raids against pro-democracy tabloid Apple Daily. She says criticism of Apple Daily raids is an attempt to promote acts that endanger national security. The sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong Un dismisses prospects of diplomacy with the United States. She says US expectations about talks could plunge them into a greater disappointment. Australia strongly opposes a UNESCO plan to list the Great Barrier Reef as in danger. The UN body has recommended the reef's World Heritage status be downgraded because of its dramatic coral decline. In a victory for Google's YouTube, a significant decision for the search engine. As the Philippines battles one of Asia's worst COVID outbreaks, President Rodrigo Duterte threatens to jail people who refuse to be vaccinated. This after reports of low turnout at several vaccination centres. Its three-shot Abdala vaccine is 92% effective against the clinical testing. Now, despite an offer from the Biden administration for talks on the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, there is now little hope for a breakthrough. This after Kim Jong Un's powerful sister appeared to dismiss the prospects of a resumption of diplomacy. In a statement released on state broadcaster KNCA, Kim Yo-jong said, and I quote, "The expectation which they chose to harbour the wrong way would plunge them into a greater disappointment." The Biden administration has extended an invitation to North Korean leader Kim Jong Un for talks on Pyongyang's nuclear program. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan made the comments on ABC News. Sullivan said the US is prepared to engage in principled negotiations with North Korea.
Well, time will tell. What President Biden has communicated is that the United States is prepared to engage in principled negotiations with North Korea to deal with the challenge of North Korea's nuclear program towards the ultimate objective of the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. We are awaiting a clearer signal from Pyongyang as to whether they are prepared to sit down at the table to begin working in that direction.
During a major ruling party meeting last week, Kim Jong Un analysed the Biden administration's North Korea policy. Kim ordered his officials to prepare for both dialogue and confrontation as well. This prompted some hope in the Biden administration that the dictatorial regime in Pyongyang may be open to dialogue. Kim Jong's statement, however, indicates that Pyongyang may stick to its confrontational approach. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden's special envoy for North Korea is in Seoul. Sung Kim met South Korea's unification minister Lee In-young, who handles relations with the North. The US representative said the two countries agreed to pursue complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula through diplomacy and dialogue.
Most importantly, we reaffirmed our two countries' shared commitment to pursuing the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula through diplomacy and dialogue. We took note of the recent statement out of Pyongyang regarding their preparation for dialogue, and we hope to receive a positive response to our proposal for a meeting soon.
상황이 대화 재개를 위해서 매우 좋은 기회인 만큼 이 자리를 빌어서 북한도 조속히 대화와 협상의 장으로 나오기를 기대한다는 점을 말씀드립니다.
The US Special Envoy had earlier stated he was willing to meet with the North Koreans anywhere, anytime, without preconditions. As North Korea, though, appeared to snub the offer of talks, Sung Kim met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in in Seoul to hold further discussions. Staying with the US position on the international stage now, and it's getting on for a week since the Biden-Putin summit in Geneva. The United States and Russia are on course to restore some elements of normal diplomatic relations, with Moscow having sent the Russian ambassador back to the United States. And now Washington will send its own envoy, John Sullivan, back to Moscow this week as well. 3 months ago, both diplomats were recalled by their governments as tensions soared between Moscow and Washington. The State Department says it remains committed to keeping communication channels open with the Russian government. It says this will aim not only to advance US interests, but also to reduce the risk of miscalculation between the two countries. Meanwhile, the Russian ambassador Anatoly Antonov has brought a series of proposals sent by Moscow on how both countries could work to try and stabilise ties. Antonov adds that the overall improvement of bilateral relations with the United States depends on Washington's political will. Let's take a look at some of the issues that Russia is touching upon here. And Moscow hopes to discuss with the US how to implement provisions of the Strategic Stability Statement. Russia is set to begin talks with US counterparts on visa issues as well, among other problems requiring close attention, according to the ambassador at least, is the issue of Washington having seized Russian diplomatic property. And on top of that, the Navalny issue continues to be a thorn in Moscow's side and in relations between the US and Russia. The Biden administration is planning to draw up new unilateral restrictions. However, Antonov says the United States' actions won't yield results in that regard and won't change Moscow's foreign or domestic policies. Moving on to Iran now, and the newly elected president of the country, Ebrahim Raisi, has taken a tough position when it comes to the United States. He's rejecting the possibility of meeting with US President Joe Biden. The 60-year-old cleric, however, backed talks between Iran and 6 world powers to revive a 2015 nuclear deal.
Iranian President-elect Ebrahim Raisi on Monday said he backed talks between Iran and 6 world powers to revive a 2015 nuclear deal, but flatly rejected meeting U.S. President Joe Biden, even if Washington removed all sanctions. In his first news conference since he was elected on Friday, the hardline cleric urged Americans and Europeans to fulfill their commitments to the nuclear deal known as the JCPOA.
The Americans violated the JCPOA, not fulfill their commitments. What I want to stress to the U.S. is that obligated to lift the sanctions and you did not. return and fulfill your commitments. To the Europeans, I say that they should definitely not remain pressured by American policies and should fulfill their commitments under the JCPOA.
Negotiations have been underway in Vienna since April to work out how Iran and the U.S. can both return to compliance with the nuclear pact, which Washington abandoned in 2018 under then-President Donald Trump, before reimposing sanctions on Iran. Iran has subsequently breached the deal's limits on enrichment of uranium, designed to minimize the risk of it developing nuclear weapons potential. Tehran has long denied having any such ambition. But when asked if he would meet U.S. President Joe Biden if sanctions were lifted, Raisi responded with a no. 60-year-old Raisi, a strident critic of the West, will take over from pragmatist Hassan Rouhani on August 3rd. Raisi said his foreign policy priority would be improving ties with Iran's Gulf Arab neighbors, while calling on Iran's regional rival Saudi Arabia to immediately halt its intervention in Yemen. Iranian and Western officials alike say Raisi's rise is unlikely to alter Iran's negotiating stance in talks to revive the nuclear deal. Iran's hardline supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has the final say on all major policy.
Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has hailed the latest sanctions against President Alexander Lukashenko. She says the West has sent a powerful signal to the regime in Belarus.
That nothing will change after these sanctions, because for sure erection of a regime will be positive or negative, nobody knows, but of course we understand that it's a very huge hit on the regime, and they have to understand that there is no other way out on the dialogue with civil society.
The European Union has extended sanctions against Belarus by imposing travel bans and asset freezes on 86 Belarusian individuals and companies. The bloc has prepared a series of economic measures aimed at hitting President Alexander Lukashenko following last month's forced landing of a Ryanair passenger plane to arrest a dissident. The EU had already banned Belarus Airlines from flying over the bloc's territory or using its airports.
Today, for this meeting in Luxembourg, first thing is to talk about Belarus. We are going to first have a meeting with the Belarusian leader, Ms. Tikhanovskaya. He will explain the situation in the country. There will be a debate, and then we will approve the package of new sanctions, which is a wider package. I think it's about 86 people or entities, not only people but also entities. And then we will also discuss about the economic sanctions, which will be presented to the European Council.
The measures were in coordination with similar sanctions by other Western countries such as Britain and the United States. The EU has gradually increased sanctions since Lukashenko won a sixth term last year in elections it says were fraudulent. The measures have targeted people accused of electoral misconduct and responsibility for the police crackdown that followed. The United States, too, has imposed sanctions on 16 individuals and 5 entities, including the State Security Committee and the press secretary of the Belarusian president. The list of sanctioned individuals also includes the Belarusian Prosecutor General, the chairman of the KGB, and the chairperson of the upper house of the country's parliament. Britain joined the EU, the US and Canada in imposing fresh sanctions on Belarus. It imposed travel bans and asset freezes against senior ranking officials in Lukashenko's government. The US has revoked the Trump-era bans on Chinese-owned apps, TikTok and WeChat. It's the latest reversal of Trump executive orders under the new Biden administration.
Trump-era bans against TikTok and WeChat were lifted Monday, The U.S. Commerce Department said it was rescinding a list of prohibited transactions with TikTok and WeChat that was put in place in September as then-President Trump looked to block new U.S. downloads of both Chinese-owned apps and other transactions that would have effectively banned the use of either app in the U.S. This is the latest reversal under the new Biden administration. Earlier this month, President Biden withdrew a series of Trump executive orders that sought to block TikTok and WeChat and ordered the Commerce Department to review national security concerns posed by the two apps and others. The Commerce Department was given 120 days to monitor software apps like TikTok and make recommendations on how to protect U.S. data acquired or accessible by companies that are controlled by foreign adversaries. A separate U.S. national security review of TikTok, launched in 2019, still remains active.
Despite its popularity around the world, in Bangladesh, TikTok has in some ways proven to be a menace. Young Bangladeshi girls have been lured into sex rackets using the app. Law enforcement has busted an illegal ring, but the government's looking for a more permanent solution, and it's considering a complete ban on TikTok.
A transnational sex racket in the subcontinent, at the center of it, a social media fad. TikTok. As the app became popular in 2019, a parallel world emerged with it. A world of fake promises and glamour. Bangladeshi girls were promised fame and money. Instead, they were smuggled across the border to India. Mostly here in Bangalore, where they were forced into the sex trade. It would have continued, perhaps expanded, if not for one girl who managed to escape. She returned to Dhaka and filed a police complaint. Around the same time, an assault video of a Bangladeshi girl began circulating on the internet. The police connected the dots. 11 people have been arrested so far, some from Bangladesh's poorest border districts, others from India. The gang leader was identified as Rafizul Islam Redoi, or TikTok Redoi. His gang of 50 smuggled around 500 girls into India. Their operation spanned 5 years, much before TikTok became a craze in Bangladesh. But once the Chinese app hit the markets, things became easier. The gang targeted teenagers from low-income families. They were invited to pool parties, cast in TikTok videos, and promised fame and money. The young girls didn't know better. But turns out this is just the tip of the iceberg. TikTok is regularly used by criminal gangs. It's become a nest of illegal activities. So the government is cracking down. TikTok users are being monitored. The chief of Bangladesh's Rapid Action Battalion wants the app to be banned, at least temporarily, so the government can get a grip on things. This episode is a reminder of social media's pitfalls. Yes, it brings the world closer, but the world isn't always a good place. South Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
To Europe next, and Italy will no longer require people to wear face masks outside. The restrictions will be lifted next week. However, the lifting of the mandatory mask requirement will only apply to regions labelled white under Italy's classification system that denotes how rapidly the coronavirus is spreading. This includes all Italian regions except the Aosta Valley, but experts predict that all of Italy will be classified as a white zone by June the 28th. The decision was taken after the country's scientific advisory panel said that people should still carry masks for events where there is a higher risk of spread, like large gatherings. Italy, which last year witnessed one of the world's worst coronavirus outbreaks, has lately been reporting a decline in cases. The country reported 21 deaths and nearly 500 new cases in the last 24 hours. Italy, which has a population of 60 million, has administered 46 million vaccine doses so far. 30% of people over the age of 12 have been fully vaccinated. In a significant development, the first ever mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub will be set up in South Africa. It's a country which is currently being hit by another spike in COVID infections and a shortage of vaccines. The World Health Organization and its COVAX partners are in discussions with companies and institutions to bring this project to life. The hub will both manufacture and provide training. WHO Chief Scientist Sumaya Swaminathan said that South Africa could start manufacturing the shots in 9 to 12 months. The initiative is part of global efforts to scale up life-saving treatments and make vaccines available for all. The main producers of COVID-19 vaccines using mRNA technology are BioNTech, Pfizer and Moderna.
Today, I'm delighted to announce that WHO is in discussions with a consortium of companies and institutions to establish a technology transfer hub in South Africa. The consortium involves a company called African Biologics and Vaccines, which will act as the hub both by manufacturing mRNA vaccines itself and by providing training to a second manufacturer called BioVac. In time, Afrigen could provide training to other manufacturers in Africa and beyond.
The hub will be the first COVID vaccine manufacturing facility in the entire African continent. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has hailed the landmark initiative as one which could change the narrative of Africa by putting it on a path of self-determination. Ramaphosa says it is just not equitable and not fair that some people are denied access to vaccines because of where they live.
That we just cannot continue to rely on vaccines that are made outside of Africa because they never come, they never arrive on time, and people continue to die. And we've therefore called on a waiver, as I spoke about, but also technology transfer. So this is a phenomenal step.
The announcement comes after French President Emmanuel Macron's recent visit to South Africa. He had expressed his country's commitment to supporting efforts in Africa in a bid to scale up local manufacturing capacity of COVID-19 vaccines and other medical solutions.
Aujourd'hui est un grand jour pour l'Afrique. Et c'est aussi un grand jour pour tous ceux qui œuvrent à un accès plus équitable aux produits de santé. Comme je le soutiens depuis des mois, la bataille contre la pandémie se déroule sur tous les continents. Cela signifie que chaque continent doit être en capacité de développer et de produire ses propres vaccins, ses propres médicaments.
Almost a century after Adolf Hitler expelled Jews from its armed forces, Germany has appointed a chief rabbi for its military. The move marks a symbolic restitution for the Jewish community. In 2019, Germany's government approved a proposal by the Central Council of Jews to restore religious counselling for Jewish soldiers in the military.
This is 42-year-old Hungarian-born Solbala. He's been installed as Germany's first military rabbi in almost 100 years since before the Holocaust. Priests and pastors already provide religious services to Christians in the German military. The equivalent, however, was not available to around 300 Jewish soldiers in the military until now.
For the first time in 100 years, there will again be military rabbis in the German armed forces. Together with the Protestant and Catholic pastors, the military rabbis will be an important pillar for our soldiers.
The ceremony took place at a Leipzig synagogue, with the country's defense minister. Israel's ambassador to Germany was also in attendance.
Today, we are strengthening something which, especially in light of Germany's history, means a lot, even though it almost sounds banal. Normality, a normality which recognizes that Jewish life, Jews belong to Germany and that Judaism belongs to the German army.
Germany's Jewish leader, Joseph Schuster, also addressed the German soldiers.
I have an idea what you had in mind when you heard that there would now be a German army rabbi. You probably imagined an old man with a white beard, long temple curls and a large hat. Maybe also a man who would now very closely watch morale. Indeed, morale is important to Rabbi Bala. But other than that, I can assure you that as a trained industrial engineer, he knows of the difficulties when there is a problem in logistics.
The move comes at a time when there are several reports of right-wing extremism within the military and the police in recent years, and also amid rising levels of anti-Semitism across the country.
We all agree it is the responsibility of every Democrat to fight anti-Semitism. And I will say very clearly, this is a highly personal responsibility for each and every one of us, also for myself.
Just like the Christian chaplains, the rabbi will offer counseling to the soldiers apart from holding religious services. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
That's all we have on this edition of WION Live Broadcast, but just bear with me as I leave you with these pictures from New Hampshire, where police who were looking into a series of car break-ins were given pause for thought in what they thought would be a much more grisly investigation, when they found that the guilty party was not a person, but a bear.
This is right, Arab.